Welcome to Halloweenish, our new 7-part decorating series where I show you how I ice traditional Halloween and non-Halloween cookies in a candy corn theme. This episode features a candy cauldron and an ice cream cone. And I try out some new techniques. While I won't be showing you all of the cookies in this series in the order I decorated them, this cauldron was the very first cookie I attempted on decorating day. I'm not entirely sure why I started with this one, but I'm kind of glad I did. This guy is a complete showstopper. Except for one little bit I'm not overly thrilled with, this is the kind of cookie that I think you could look at and say, I'm not eating that. It's too nice. Of course, you could look at it and think, I'm not eating that. It's all black. In case you don't already know, black icing turns your mouth blue when you eat it. And while it only lasts a couple of minutes, it's a little disconcerting, unless you're a cameraman and you think it's funny. And look at just how stunning this black flood is. It's so satisfyingly bewitching, I think I'm gonna stay silent while I finish this flood. My black icing is just a tiny bit on the thicker side, so to settle the icing, a good little shake gets the job done nicely. Just be careful to keep a good hold on that cookie, because it is really easy to drop it. How might I know that? I chose to shake the cookie instead of using the scribe to settle the icing because it is quicker. I need to be quick because of this little wet on wet bit I'm doing here. I don't want my icing to start to dry out while I move the dot around with my scribe. This is the one part I'm not happy with. My problem here is that my white flood icing is too thick. I solved this problem later, but after I finish this cookie. In fact, I actually decorated 2 of each cookie shape throughout this entire series. And at the end of decorating, I will show you both. Sadly, these spots didn't look good on either one. But the remainder of what I do here helps to distract the eye. I used a 1 consistency outline and flood for the cauldron itself. Now that I've let my cookies sit in the dehydrator for about 15 minutes to let the icing form a crust layer, it is safe for me to use my medium peak icing to pipe on these candy dots. I'm not sure how well you can really see it from the side shot, but some of the peaks are just a little too peaky for me. Now this probably isn't really necessary, especially if you consider that I cover up most of these bottom layer dots. Since this is the only flooded black cookie in the entire series of 14 designs, I should probably tell you about my icing. This is the exact same icing that I used in the Humble Bee series. If you're curious to see how I made this black, the link to part 3, Icing Bees, is linked below. Once I finish my decorating day, I always fold down the ends of my piping bags, put on an itty bitty binder clip to keep it shut, and toss it into my freezer. So this black icing is literally the leftovers from Humble Bee. I did not do anything to this icing but take it out of the freezer, let it sit on my counter for about 20 minutes, remove the clip, and start flooding. You can't always do that with every color because often the icing will get looser after having been frozen, requiring a bit of fresh icing to be added to help stiffen it back up. But I have found that with black, I can use it straight out of the freezer. Black icing is different from other colors. It comes straight out of the gel tube, a little stiffer and a little drier, and behaves differently once mixed into the icing. Every cookie decorating series I design starts with a pencil, eraser, graph paper, and a cookie cutter. And yes, I absolutely trace around the cutters. No drawing talent here. And just like the cone cutter coming up next, I don't have a clue where this cutter was purchased. These cutters were given to me by my mother-in-law from her stash of cutters. They are probably 30 years old. You might have noticed here that I named each cookie in this series. Believe me, coming up with names is a lot harder than you might think. I named this one Ombre Candy Cone because of the coloring technique that I use. I've seen the graceful baker use what she calls an ombre several times, but honestly, I couldn't quite figure out what ombre actually is. Probably because I do absolutely nothing to my hair, which is where most women would probably know ombre from. So I looked it up. In case you're like me and live under a rock and you don't know what ombre is, it's a gradual blend of one color to another. Now, a true ombre goes from dark to light. However, I think I might have missed the dark to light part when I designed this cookie. And so what we ended up with was reverse candy corn ombre. There are 3 basic themes in this series. 1, Halloween. Did I really need to state that? 2, candy corn colors. Also pretty obvious at this point. And 3, texture. Most of the cookies have literal, actual, feelable texture on the surface of the cookie. A couple of the wet on wet designs have what I would call a visual texture. I am using a soft peak piping for all 3 colors on this cookie. I have a few cookies in this series where I don't do any flooding at all. In some ways they are simple, and in others, not so much. I don't know if this has an actual name, but I call this Slubbed technique, which means I'm manipulating the icing in a way that produces thick, uneven sections called slubs. I noticed pretty quickly that this soft peak doesn't really want to stick to the surface of my cookie too easily. As I swipe the brush, the icing wants to stick to the brush and not really the cookie, which makes it a little difficult to get the icing to look like what I have in my head. At this point, I'm starting to wonder if I should have used a medium peak because the icing is actually smoothing out more than I would like. What I really want is for it to look really rough, not to have a smooth, melty looking surface. I am using a dry brush, so all of the meltiness of this is coming from the agitation of the icing. Notes on the brush. I purchased this brush at Michael's craft store, where the options are overwhelming and endless. This is called a filbert brush, and it's the same brush that I used in the Princess Chronicles series to do brush embroidery, which shows up again in this series. If I were to do this again, I might switch to a stiffer-ended brush, but I think pretty much any brush will get the job done here. After I brought the brush home, I washed it with warm water and dish soap. I cannot imagine trying to use a brush that was used for something else. So please, if you are going to use a brush on your cookies, go buy one and designate it only for your cookies. I'm pretty sure I spent less than $5 on this brush. I think this is a good design for a beginner decorator. And since at this point I'm like 1 millimeter higher than a beginner on the cookie decorating ladder, I can say I think doing a design like this might help you to feel like you accomplished something really nice. One of the ways this design is on the easy side is that since I'm using a soft peak to decorate versus using a flood icing, I don't have to worry about over flooding and causing the icing to slide right off my cookie, which is really easy to do. Not only would this be good for someone just breaking into cookie decorating, but this probably would be perfect to do with kids. You can use any colors and any combination, and no matter what, it all swirls together like it'll look finished. Another possible bonus to decorating the cookie this way is that there isn't a thick layer of icing, which does two things. One, it allows the cookie to dry a lot quicker because the icing is much thicker and therefore dries faster. And two, some people aren't huge fans of thick icing. So for them, this is a great cookie. They don't have to feel left out of getting super cute hand-decorated cookies because they don't really like much icing. You can see I'm struggling to get a nice graduated color and the very textured look I want. So one of the ways I attempt to achieve this is by revisiting the icing that is starting to dry, hoping that it will rough up nicely. I really like the way this design turned out in the end. See you next time for part 2, candy cookies.
Next time on Kuny's Cookie Chronicles.
Last time we made a candy cauldron and an ice cream cone. In this part 2 of Halloweenish, we make a simple candy cookie and a recognizable bunny covered in sanding sugar.